So we've started looking at how to use YAML for our config file, and before we do anything else, we're going to go in and we're going to add the YAML library or the YAML package, so we can load YAML files using the load method. So we're saying that we loaded the config file. It's a stream right now, an input-output stream from the file, and we're going to take that stream and pass it to this YAML.load function. And YAML.load can take in a stream like we're passing here or a string and convert it into a Python object as long as it's valid YAML. So there we go, and we have this file that we can start using. So we can load it up with some valid YAML syntax. So here we see that there are three things that we're checking for, right? So there's forms, comments, and password inputs, and we can shorten that to passwords. So we can add those as keys in our file. Forms, let's say true. And this is how you enter things into YAML. And then we can say comments true, and then we can say password inputs true. And so now we are saying that check for all these things, and we can look and see how that comes across in our config before we use it. And we can go here and we can say pass this config.yaml file, and you see what it's doing here. It's parsing that text and returning us forms as a key, comments as a key, and password inputs as a key. Or let's make that actually just passwords. There we go, and it's saying all three are true. So all three are true, and they are part of a Python dictionary, and so that's a consumable form for us in our logic in the application. So we can start doing stuff like this. We can start saying if config, and then we can say config forms, and we don't need to do anything else because this will be a boolean. So we can say only run this part of the code if config forms is true. And so you'll see that everything is working as expected. And then what happens if we change this to false? There you go. Now there's no form reporting happening, and so we can change that. We can change that for the rest of them as well. And then so what this is now saying is we're basically turning features on and off. We're checking for things if the config settings tell us to check for them, otherwise we are not. See, those are still turned on, but then suppose we change them to be false. And there you go. Now it's saying, nice job, your HTML document is secure, since we don't care about the rest of those. So of course we need to remove our little print here. And what happens if we actually don't have anything in here? There you go, we get an issue because config forms is no longer valid as an entry. We get this error, and that's of course not very pretty, so we are going to have to take care of that. So the way we do that is we actually have a default config object, and we are going to just override our default config object with something that we get from our YAML loaded config object here. And so first we need to have one, of course, and I can just be lazy and just copy this here, and that works. And we can say that everything is true by default, and then if there is a config object, then it'll get overwritten. There we go. And so now this one is blank, and this one is going to be the one that replaces it. And we just need to make sure that this config and this config end up not having a conflict. And so that's where something like this will come handy. So we say this is config from file. If config from file, meaning that it's there, then config equals to config from file. And so now when we run this, you'll see that everything gets turned on because we don't have anything here. But then if we do something like let's go ahead and see what's happening. Yes, so you'll see we've run into an issue, and that issue is that now it's no longer empty, so it's overriding it, but it doesn't provide us settings for everything. So what do? We are going to have to merge the configs, and we'll take a look at how we do that in the next lecture.